Good afternoon. My name is Nicholas Moore. I'm a research coordinator and a tutor at the Strelka Institute for Media Architecture and Design here in Moscow. And is there some translation that is happening for you? You hear me? You understand me? No? Okay. I have joining me today two conversants who will present their experience and their ideas. The first, at far right, or to your left, is Sabine Lebesque of the City of Amsterdam Development Department. She's trained as an architectural historian, and she has been working for several years now in the field of architecture and development. She's published on Jona Friedman and also on the development of waterfront spaces in Amsterdam, and she will share some of her experience with us. And then we also have, to my right, Weiwen Huang, who is trained as an architect and an urban planner and is from the city of Shenzhen, where he is the director of the Shenzhen Center for Public Art and also the Shenzhen Center for Design. Further, he is the main organizer of the Shenzhen Biennale, and together the three of us will discuss questions of urban growth, history, and development and redevelopment of urban territories. I'd like to begin by asking the question about the management of urban growth and how can this be done, especially in places where there's a need for fast growth and in places where there is already urban fabric and ecological conditions that need to be dealt with. So Sabine, perhaps you can show your presentation and tell us your story. Thank you.
Do I do something wrong? There we go. Hello, good afternoon. On behalf of the City of Amsterdam, I'm very happy to have the opportunity to speak here and to explain you a little bit what Amsterdam is and how we deal with growth. First of all, I'd like to make a comment about the size of Amsterdam. Because if we're talking about urban growth and sprawl in the world, and here in a big city as Moscow, I am very aware that Amsterdam with only over 800,000 inhabitants, not even a million, we are really a small city, and I feel like a Minnie Mouse in a city of Moscow, and if we're also talking about Chinese big cities, Amsterdam is just a sand coral. That doesn't mean that the experiences we have and the history of planning can be maybe useful for other cities, for bigger cities and for new towns. Amsterdam is part of the metropolitan region, and also the history of the Netherlands makes that we have more little towns that all together make an agglomeration which is over nearly to 2.5 million inhabitants. It's also, well, let's see, yeah, if you look at this picture, one of the strongest economic regions of the world, together with Antwerp and Rotterdam, The Hague, this area, we are one of the biggest regions, economic strongest regions in Europe. For Amsterdam, we can say that there's a quite special situation that we are owners of most of the land of the city within our boundaries. This system makes that we are able to plan right from the beginning, and we are also earning money back for the city from which we pay education and other social needs. So actually, beside of the many investors and private money that goes in the city itself is the biggest investor of all of it. And Amsterdam has a very strong planning tradition. You have to realize that the northwest side of the Netherlands is actually not existing without planning. If we don't work together and we make very strict preparations how we use the ground, we should be under the water level and I shouldn't be here today. The many structure plans, also for today, we still work with a structure plan that goes to 2010. And to show you the result of that is that most of it, and I come back to show you that in the next slides more, that actually our concentration is how to densify the ring. In Amsterdam, every year we have about 12,000 new people coming. Of course, I realize this has nothing to do with the amounts in Russia, but anyhow, for Amsterdam, it's a big demand and a big problem because we only had a housing production about 3,000 or 5,000 a year in the good years. So that means a lot of people are coming and don't have a house. And these are only the people that are coming, but there are far more people that wish to live in Amsterdam but are not able to. Amsterdam has some characteristics, and most of you maybe have been in Amsterdam, I think, but have never been further away than the Canal District. We have in the south of Amsterdam the International Business District Zuidas, which is coming up very quickly. We have the airport Schiphol, that's one of the biggest of the world. We have the fourth port of Europe. Together with Rotterdam, we are the first, so that's something really an economic motor of the city. And we have a big waterway that's called the IJ. Of course, Amsterdam is called after the river Amstel, but the IJ is actually the industrial waterway, and that's the area we are changing very rapidly now, and that's a very nice development. But if you look at this picture, then you see that Amsterdam, due to the structural plan that we have from 1935, also a very strong planning towards the green areas that come into the city. Like Copenhagen, Amsterdam is a finger city, and the green areas are very still very reachable for every person in Amsterdam. I live right in the center of town, and within 10 minutes I can cycle to a real meadow with real cows that produce milk that I can drink at home. So that's something really a good quality of town. And beside of the green areas, also these waterways are very important for the livability of the city. And as you know, Amsterdam is really successful now, but you have I like to tell you that in the 1980s, Amsterdam was more or less like this still. The old city was really run down, nobody wanted to live there, and new families were brought to the suburbs and to the new towns around Amsterdam. That's also the time when Almere was built, and there was no quality in the city anymore. People were moving away from it. And if you look at the city of today, our main focus is really to take the people away from the center, because we have too much pressure on the center, and we like to use the edges of the city more, and that's also the place where we can densify. And also, although Amsterdam is a very compact urban fabric and very low, as you see, its high-rise is something exceptional. It's one of the densest areas in the world. Amsterdam is a bike city, and everybody knows it, and it's maybe a bit of a joke nearly, but it is really an important characteristic of our city, and also for future development. It's not only a way to move from one side to the other in a quick and cheap way, but it also keeps people healthy. There's a good interaction between people, and it's something that makes Amsterdam different than all the other cities in the world, because I think also in China it's changing rapidly. And for us, bike is not only a way of moving cheaply to one or the other side, but it is also a way of living that makes us really quite healthy compared with other European cities. And also for children and also for business people, the bike is a very normal way of transportation. Tourism is another problem that we are facing, or not another, but a problem that we are facing, because the fact that Amsterdam is World Heritage, the canal part, has resulted in a bigger and enormous amount of tourists in the city center. And of course this is enjoyable, but that also gives a lot of pressure on the people who live there, because the city center is still a place where people live, go to school, play and work. So it's not like other cities maybe where the people live abroad or around the city center itself is very much a living area as well. The gay parade, not too, so we have a quite tolerant and open society. I like to mention as well that the use of the qualities of Amsterdam, the canals and the water and so on, are not only there for the tourist, also the own use and the own people like very much to use these qualities of Amsterdam. And the city life is also the city life, the daily life of children, where they use the city as a big playground, let's say. And of course we skate. This is just right off my door, so it's not a kind of picture of a very special moment, but something that happens nearly every winter. Let's see how we densificate, because like in Moscow, as far as I know, the ring zone is really the way how we try to densify and to make the city better and to program around the center, so the center becomes bigger and also the tourists and the people can make more use of a bigger surface. Development areas move actually from this ring road into the outskirts, but being very aware of these green lawns that go into the city. And one of the things that we use very much in programming the new areas is making program of public program, social program, schools, educations. Actually, as a city council, we think about that first, and then after that, the investors come and do the second step, namely building the things. Two examples of two areas within this ring road that we are building at the moment. This is one that is along the river Amstel, and it was an old industry, and now it becomes a mixed-use area with housing, working, education, and students, and so on. It's on its way now. And one of the other big development areas is in the water of the IJ, on the east side of the central station, where we actually build onwards of the old idea of canals, and we make a new model of that. The waterfront development around the waterfront IJ is actually our long-term planning, and we do that very careful and very precise to have a kind of, in time, that industry can slowly move out and people can inhabit these waterfront areas. This is an example that is quite famous at the Easter Harbor area that's done in the 90s, and that was the beginning, but we also have new land in the east side of Amsterdam towards IJmere. This is how we make new land, and this is how it looks now. You see on the right hand the last bit of our extensions in islands. But to come to my point in the end, because I don't have a lot of time, is that we are really focusing on people that have initiatives in new areas and not always have the planning in the first place, but use the people that have some initiatives in the areas first and then see how it goes, take our time in planning, and then with the flow develop an area. So we do that sometimes with squatters or artists that take up old industry terrains, and we let them be there. We let festivals happen, and we use, for example, students to place them in a redundant place, in an old shipping wharf or whatever. We make temporary student flats. People are going to have little cafes there, they have their nightlife there, and then slowly on we create more or less value before, as a city, we're going to sell out. So we are patient and we wait until it's the right moment. If we sell too early our ground, or lease it out, we don't sell, then it's not in the benefit of the city. So to be patient with planning is one of the tactics we use very much in Amsterdam, and we are very aware of this trick. Yeah. One of the other characteristics of development is also the self-built houses. We are very aware in Amsterdam that you cannot put all the people in apartment blocks anymore. A lot of them are very happy with that, but there are also people, and if you want to make a mixed-use city with all levels on one scale, you have to give people the possibility to build their own house. And this is really successful in Amsterdam. This was an experiment 60 plots in a row from the year 2000, but even today it's far more popular. This is one of, in an area that will be about 50% self-built houses, and that's really a new thing in Amsterdam. Of course, people could build their house before as well, but now from the city we organize this, that people can buy a plot of land and make their own design and produce a house that they really wished and dreamt of. The River Amstel is still very, very accessible, and we also have this plots of meadows right in the green lawns that are very nearby the city of Amsterdam. This extreme planning of every square meter of ground is actually the basis of how we are looking forward to the future, where the city will grow enormously. Like every city in the world, Amsterdam is the capital of the Netherlands, and people come from the whole country to this area, so we have to face the growth, but with the awareness that we only can make a good and livable city if we keep these nice places and are really caring of them. So I like to finish with a picture that was 2 days ago in our local newspaper. I don't know in which town it is, but my question was, if I see this man on his meadow doing his vegetables, in the background you see the sprawl of flats of China, I'm really afraid that here there's a lack of sustainable use of land, and I hope that the cities of the future, after a first layer of construction, will really realize that they have to keep and look for the qualities of their city. Every place has it, and really care for that before you go and build the things again. So my statement maybe for the discussion, place and people, that's what makes profit. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabine. And now maybe in response, I'd like to ask Wei Wen to make some comment about what he's seen, especially in terms of how Shenzhen and other Chinese cities are using planning to manage their urban growth.
Ja, sebenarnya showed very beautiful pictures, and I totally agree with her idea. Is, if you make a livable city, you need to make make space for people, and let people get their space, and this is very important. And compared with Shenzhen, a very young city, just 35 years old, there's a lot of things need to learn from Amsterdam, because I know that Amsterdam is a model city, but I'm very interested with the introduction about the self-building in Amsterdam. I think this is empower people to participate in the construction of the city, the growth of the city, and let the people, not just the urban planner and architects, let the citizens could build their buildings, could make diversity for city. And this is a very important mechanism for people, participant, the city's growth. But in Shenzhen, we have another model to allow the people participant. This is informal housing, because my city, Shenzhen, grows so fast. The population in 1980 is just 300,000, but now it's 30 million. So it's a huge bombing. So how to facilitate so many people, especially for the migrants people and the low-class people, how to provide affordable housing for them. It's difficult for the city government to do that. So the local citizens build their buildings by themselves to provide cheap renting house for the migrant workers. So they build in maybe in illegal way, but it support the rapid growth of city. So it also made diversity and made a dynamic for the city. So it's very important to allow the people get involved of the growth of city.
Thank you. You mentioned illegal construction and this informal construction. Are there ways in which informality is designed or in which it can be designed? And we spoke earlier about the example of non-design or undesigning parts of Amsterdam. I wonder if there are relations between Dutch models of letting people build for themselves and the Chinese solutions to similar situations. Maybe Wei Wen, you can comment first on the responses to informal construction.
Yeah, this is different models. In Shenzhen, we say the informal, but even informal, the citizens also hire some architects to drawing, to provide a design for them. But sometimes they just copy. They just copy the design scheme, design blueprints, and so they get a very cheap design service. But it's also, I think that this is also a model. We couldn't say the totally informal, because they introduced the design trend, the design process to their housing. Yeah, but I'm not sure what the situation in Amsterdam is. People design and build by themselves, or they also hire the architects design for them.
Yes, Sabine, do you have a response, please?
I first like to refer to what you say, this informality and how to use that. Of course, the Netherlands is a very, very controlled country. So kind of informal building officially doesn't exist. But how do we deal with that? Because we know very well that this is actually a solution to let things happen and to create value on a place. So we have this kind of thing that we call temporary permission, building permission. So you can do something for 5 years or 10 years or sometimes 15 years. And sometimes it's so good it stays the rest of its time. But we use this as so we can have a formal way to make informality. And that works really well. On the other hand, there's also a lot of sometimes critique on it, because people who start something up, artists are allowed to use an old industrial building in the harbor area, let's say, and then after 10 years they have built up their society, and then the housing corporation comes or an investor and says, yeah, sorry, your time is over, you have to move on. But on the other hand, people accept as well that this crowd of people that are the pioneers or the front runners of city development, that they move on all the time. So they move from one place, and after a certain time they go to the next place. And the thing is, as a city, we are really, really aware of this and use this as a tool to create value on a certain place. We're very good in waiting. Now we have a very big area in the center of Amsterdam, just right of the central station, and it was from the marine until now. And in January, in 2 weeks' time, it will open for the public. And nearly nobody of Amsterdam has ever been there, because it's a hidden place. And of course, a lot of planners and a lot of ideas have come already on the table to make a master plan for this area. But we have decided, no, we don't make a master plan. We're first going to do festivals, we have the European seat there, and after that, if we see what's more or less going on and how people start to know the place, then we may be going to let investors come. But then we have created value, and we as a city can earn well on it when we wait for the right moment.
Can you tell us, Sabine, about the way that the city supports this kind of informality with infrastructure?
In several ways. We have an official office that's called Broedplaatsen, breeding places, where artists or entrepreneurs or startups can phone and ask, do you have a place or whatever. So we are also organizing this informality. So it's a formal informality or an informal formality, how you want to name it.
But what about in terms of physical infrastructure? For example, in this place of the self-built houses, what kind of things is the city doing to enable this construction?
Well, that's the self-built plots. They are sold really on a market. So it's announced we have a market, self-built market in summer. And sometimes, well, not sometimes, we did it now for the 3rd year. People are 3 weeks before the opening of the market. They are camping on the place because they want a certain plot, and this creates a whole boost, of course, in the city. So the first one is saying, "I am the first one for that plot," and then a whole camp place exist and with music and people coming to bring food to the row of people, and it's really interesting, and so it becomes very popular. And of course there's also some regulation. You have to build your plot in a certain period of time so you don't disturb the neighbors with your building activities, and of course the ground conditions and all the infrastructure to build a house in the first place is there more or less on the plot, and then you have to build your house. Some people really do it by hand with their own hands and are not an architect, and they collect from second-hand places old leftovers materials, and some invite a top architect and build a design house.
Thank you. Wei Wen, can you tell us about the development of infrastructure, especially in informal parts of the city in Shenzhen?
I introduced the meeting with some colleagues, included the Moscow's open planning settlement. I introduced Shenzhen's development. There's a very strong energy from the local people who would build housing, cheap housing for the migrant workers. We have a half population. It means 6 or 7 million people live in this kind of informal building provided by the local villagers. So it's a very important mechanism to support the Shenzhen's rapid growth. So I'm very interested because we talk the different model of the informal housing. So Nicole, how about in Moscow, or is any audience in here could give some example of the informal model in Moscow? How about in Moscow?
You're asking about the informal models of housing in Moscow. Mm-hmm. I'm not an expert. Maybe we have some here that we can discuss with later. I do know that there is, of course, lots of development going on in Moscow, and that there are aspects of that development which are more or less informal, depending on the relationships of the builders and the city. Much of the city land is owned, in fact, by the municipality, so in some ways I think there are similar structures to what Sabine is discussing. But the published numbers of population in Moscow, as I understand them, are somewhere around 12 million inhabitants. On the other hand, there is an unofficial number that is drawn from statistics like food consumption, which suggests a population somewhere closer to 20 million people. So you have a population of people who are unofficial, but are somewhere living in the city. So I would say that the opportunities for research on this population and where they are living are extant and significant.
Why we are interested in this topic, I think that this is very important to allow the people to get involved directly the growth of a city, and because even Shenzhen is very young and it's a totally top-down urban planning guide the construction of the city, but the urban planning system always fail when in practicing, when in implement. It's very huge. There's very huge gap between the idea planning and the reality. So this is very important to let people participate in the process of the city growth.
Can you tell us, as the director or the organizer of the Shenzhen Biennale, which is some kind of social infrastructure, and maybe in some ways similar to the kind of social infrastructure that Sabine described in Amsterdam, can you tell us how you've been using the Biennale to engage the population of Shenzhen with the planning of the city?
Yeah, why we established the Biennale on urbanism and architecture? It's just because we are developing so rapid, so we need to rethink what we done is right and what we done is wrong. So the Shenzhen Biennale is a platform provide the public journalists, the professionals to discuss the urban issues, the urban challenge, the urban problem. So it's also a tool to allow the people to participate in the urban planning discussion and also learn some professional knowledge about the urban planning. Yeah.
Shall I say something about it? I think that's really interesting that exists. But Amsterdam is actually using this informality or this engaging people in another way by just let them occupy a space and then not have already a plan from the city or a construction, but just let something happen. And I like to explain this better because I think this can be a tool for far more cities, not depending on size. And I'm looking to one of the students, or several here from the Strelka Institute that were in the summer at a workshop, and we had a plot in nearby the river, opposite the Kremlin, and the investor and the city like to know how to develop such a block with empty spaces in it and an old power plant, and they have the possession of the block, and of course they can make apartments there, but do you make city with that? Is that the city you want if you make high-end apartments where probably nobody is going to live then? So we were talking about how can you start using the place for the normal people first. So we spoke about there's a little theater there that's locally used. Nobody knows it. The investor didn't know that it was existing. But we spoke about how can you, for example, start with making every Friday evening a dance evening or a theater evening in a court there, so that people start to know this place and it opens up. This trick is a way how you can first make place, and it doesn't depend on money. You don't need money for this kind of things. You use the infrastructure, the social infrastructure that is already in every place in the world. And then slowly from there out, you're going to develop and build. And of course I say slowly, sometimes because you have such a big amount of people coming in towns, you have to make more speed. But with this way of thinking, I think you make more sustainable cities than just think about it from paper and construct.
I'm wondering, both of you, we spoke earlier and you both mentioned the ecology of the city. And Sabine, you showed this model of the the Five Fingers plan to keep greenery accessible. I wonder, Weiwen, if you can respond to this in the sense of what kind of things you're doing in Shenzhen that are maintaining access to ecology in that part of the city.
Because Shenzhen developed so quickly, this is, I think this is the part of the globalization on the space production. So the land consumed so quickly. use of most of the land we could use. It means 90% of the developable land have developed yet. So for the city, it's a huge challenge to keep the minimal limit of the ecology system. So we have ecological control line for those undevelopable land. It's about 50% of the whole area. So this is very important to keep the boundary of the growth. Yeah. So let the city have the ecological system also is also one kind of infrastructure.
And Sabine, can you tell us how in Amsterdam and in the Netherlands in general, the relation between ecology and planning is working? Like, how do you preserve this space, or as cities grow, how do you make it continuously accessible?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, as I said, every square meter has a planning destination. So if it's once green, it's very difficult to have it built. But I think the question is more how you not make such a black and white division between green area and built area, but how to make your built area also a sustainable and livable and good area. And well, one of the things I already mentioned, that is the bicycle as a main way of transportation in the city, besides public transport, but really we push the car out of Amsterdam. Within the ring road, the modal split of transportation is is about 60% now. So that means that not you going to cycle in the weekend with your helmet on, like it's happening in New York or in London or Barcelona. No, I go with my director together. We go into a meeting and we're doing that on the bike. And also if it rains, I mean, weather conditions like this. Of course, in New York, in Moscow, it can be far more colder, but normally we can also face snow and rain and wind. The Netherlands is very rainy and very windy, I can tell you. But the other thing is the water quality. We are a country of water, and the canals and the IJ are, at this moment, the water is so clean that you can swim in it. So all the people that are living in the waterfront areas, they jump from their house into the water in the summer. Well, also in winter, some people swim, have the training the whole year around. So what I want to say is that sustainability is, beside of the building quality, that the energy values are going lower, so that's really good. But sustainability has to be, well, right immediately if you step out of your door, and not only if you go to a special park or green area.
Thank you. Wei Wen, do you have some response to this in the context of a different planning situation that you have in China? Obviously, the speed of growth that we've talked about in Shenzhen and the size of the city is very different from Amsterdam, as has been noted. But can you tell us, as a planner and as a scholar of urban planning, can you tell us what opportunities do you see for taking some of these ideas or ideas that have been developed outside of China and applying them there?
China's urban planning system, I think, came from Soviet Union, and also from the modern urban planning theory, from the Le Corbusier and the Arthur Charter, yeah, And so this is very functional, and but sometimes always regard the city as very simple. Just 4 parts. One is for living, for working, for recreation, for transportation. So the city planned just very simple and just car-oriented, car-based. So they built a huge boulevards and huge squares, always lost the human scale. And so this system, I know that in Western, this urban planning system has been passed, but in China, we need to rethink, and we need to look for new models. So we need to learn from the good cities. And as urban planner in Shenzhen, I experienced most of the important urban planning. So I still rethinking. We need to change our urban planning mechanism. We need to keep a friendship between the nature and the human development. So in the first day, the lecture I showed my idea is possible to allow the development coexistent with the ecosystem. I think that this is a very important issue to, or it's a very important challenge for all the urban planners.
Thank you. Sabine, I wonder if I can reverse the question. As a planner from Amsterdam and working in Europe, I wonder, looking in cities that are growing faster and are much newer, what do you see as opportunities to learn from them?
You mean other cities for Amsterdam?
For Amsterdam, but also maybe for Western Europe, for more places which have been more developed already in the past several hundred years. What can be imported from places which are undergoing extreme developments now?
Yet I write new towns, what we in Amsterdam can learn from it. So the other way around. Yeah, well, there's one thing I already said, Amsterdam is very flat. And we are about to start with some high-rise housing, which is not very common in the Netherlands. We have a little bit in Rotterdam, because the city of Rotterdam, the center was bombed in the World War, so there is empty space, let's say. Amsterdam cannot build very high, also because of the UNESCO regulations that from the old canal part you're not allowed to see high rise, but nevertheless to build in higher density, higher than we are used to, that's something we have to practice and to learn from, and that's why we're also looking very much to other towns. And also, although we can be sometimes negative about the Chinese way of rapid growth, we also impressed by the way how they can produce such an amount of houses, while we are, with our whole planning regulation, takes enormous amount of time to get something done, and sometimes it's too slow. So we also look very much to other cities, how they can grow and what we can use from that in Amsterdam. There's a lot to do still.
Thank you. We only have a couple of minutes left, but I wonder, I've been asking all of the questions. I wonder if when you have a question for Sabine or vice versa, that I can invite you now to ask each other. I don't know if there's
No,
anything.
I have a question to you.
Okay, please.
Because I'm very interested in Structure. This is a new design school. Would you introduce how this school get involved of the Moscow's urban planning or the growth of the city?
You're asking how Strelka is working on the urban planning of Moscow. So Strelka, for those of you who don't know, Strelka is an institute, and part of this institute is the producer of this urban forum. But another part of the institute where I work is a research institute, and it's conducting research on not only Moscow, but Russian cities in general, and also urban conditions in the world, and also questions of media and design in general. So it has quite a broad basis for investigation, but I would say that as a school, it is working in some ways as a traditional school does, but as an institute as a whole, it's producing other kinds of knowledge. So for example, this urban forum is one of the ways that it is seeking to influence urban design. And so we've brought together people like yourselves, also developers, the public, and similar to the ways that you were discussing. There's also a consultancy bureau of Strelka, which is doing projects of urban planning and advising on competitions. So the Institute is trying to experiment with ways in which designers and design professionals can interact with each other, also with politicians, with developers, with different specialties, to increase knowledge and to bring new ideas, especially to Moscow, but also to Russia in general, and then to share those ideas with the world. On that note.
I wished we had such an institute in Amsterdam.
Well,
We did once, it was the Berlage Institute, but that moved to Rotterdam. And now we are quite far away from the research kind of side of urbanism. And it's difficult to make a connection between the new ideas and the actually planning of the city. So that's also something we can learn from other cities better.
thank you. Maybe so that we stay on schedule, I have exactly 6 o'clock. So with that, I think, thank you very much for your conversation and your presentations, and I wish you the best in your work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.